Us back to session. We did start at 5:30 tonight. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate everybody being here. The first thing I would like to do is have a motion to approve our minutes from our last regular meeting in November.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Jack. Any questions on the minutes or corrections? All in favor of approving them, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda, but we are going to make a few changes in the agenda tonight. We're going to put our budget committee meeting first, and then the borrowing part of our administrative. Right after that, we have a guest here who will help us through some of that. So with that change, I need approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I received one public comment. Any other people in the public that turned in slips? No. Thank you. Moving on to our report, starting with our student report. I see Caden, but not Isabel.
Right.
Caden, you're alone tonight? Welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's been a great month for the school. So as you guys do know, we do have the Rotary lights set up right now. And the school's been helping out, volunteer there. We've been giving out candy canes to the people, just kind of sitting around the campfire, bonding type of thing. And then for sports, hockey has started up this month. The boys actually have a game tonight against DeForest at the ice pond. And for basketball, the boys played at Pfizer Forum over the weekend. I think it was against Oconomowoc. And then for basketball, the girls started up their season as well. And then for the boys swim team, they started up their season. They played in the Memorial and Sun Prairie swim meet. And then the boys wrestling had a huge meet over the weekend at the high school. And from what I've heard, they actually did pretty well. And then the Waunakee/DeForest gymnastics team also started up this month as well. So all the winter sports are really just getting started up. Over the weekend, we also did Call an Elf at the high school, and that was a huge success for us. And then the Model UN group also went to a competition called Mad Mun over the weekend, where it's just all the Madison schools do a Model UN meeting. And then for the school holiday break is really getting everyone excited. Everyone's ready to just have 2 more weeks and then take their break. And that's all that's been going on, really.
Wonderful. Any questions for Caden? So do you have a winter sport, Caden, or?
I do not. Well, I like to snowboard, but I don't do it like competitively or anything. I just like to go out there and have fun.
So you'll be here every
Yes, ma'am.
Monday night, because Isabel, I think, does hockey.
Yep, she is at a hockey match right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing those highlights with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just to add something, I mean, he mentioned it on Rotary Lights. I appreciate Rotary involving our student groups. I think it started a number of years ago. We've had Pay It Forward has gone there for several years. I think they do 2 different nights, and then there's a few other groups that, as they're available, are taking up some of those slots, and then the proceeds that are brought in by Rotary are then kicked back through some of those groups, and there's a donation that's given to them. So thanks for participating in those, and thanks to Rotary for recognizing our students and our programs.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Have a great holiday, and I'll see you guys next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we also have a teacher update tonight. Anne Marie?
Bethany.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Marie Paradison, teacher at Arboretum Elementary School.
And I'm Bethany Pottinger, also a teacher at Arboretum.
We just want to report on the recertification results. Over 99% of the vote came through with voted yes for recertification, so that's really great news to share. And also just wanted to thank the board for the continued attendance of coming to all the different schools to discuss concerns and to update teachers on what's going on and to listen to us so you could provide the best information for teachers and for the students so we could best serve everybody. We really appreciate that.
And the intermediate school had a number of great things going on. They had an hour of code that happened last week. The 5th grade students participated in a breakout EDU in Spanish class, and the 6th grade students will create and print a stamp for a clay bowl project using the 3D printer. Also at Arboretum, we're really celebrating a smooth transition to having 2 administrators. That's really had a great impact on the staff. We all really appreciate having that second admin in the building. Also the kids are really being positively impacted as well, having an additional person who's, making their presence known, but then also Sheila's able to get into the classrooms more, and interact with students more than she was able to before. So everyone is really appreciative of having that second administrator.
Thanks for saying that. Any questions for the staff? Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, ladies.
Have a good holiday.
You too.
Next, is there any board members that attended any sessions or events that they would like to share tonight?
Last Tuesday, I was in the building in the high school, and I watched the concert in the PAC, the girls' basketball game, and the gymnastics.
Right.
A lot of activity in that building,
Yep.
a lot of energy.
Last, I think it was 2 weeks ago, at the library, we went to see the documentary presentation of Wisdom of Trauma. It just shows the background of so many kids, what they're bringing into the classroom, and to be aware of what we need to be looking for when we trying to help the kids. Because everybody brings their own load to school sometime, and it's difficult.
Our CARES Coalition did that session. They actually did an afternoon and an evening, and I also was able to attend one. And it's pretty powerful to look at and listen to some of the research behind the trauma that we've gone through.
I attended the Waunakee CARES visionary session last week.
Oh, good for you.
Incorporated some business representatives from law enforcement, both local and Dane County. We had business administrators, including Todd Schmidt from the village, a number of private citizens, and myself, and helping to take the data and then help create some ideas for how they can set their goals for the next year.
Good. Great, thank you for sharing. Moving on to our committee reports, as I said, we're going to do those a little out of order, starting with our budget committee. And can we do the budget in the order it is and then just have that at the end? So we're scrolling down to 10E Budget Committee. I don't know if Jack or Steve wants to take it over.
Take her away there, Steve.
Thank you, Jack. So the first item in the board packet for your review is not an action item. We just shared with the budget committee the draft of the timeline for the 23-24 budget process. As board members, the key thing to keep your eye on is really the discussion that will be taking place in early winter regarding the state budget. Just something to be monitoring. That will have the most significant impact on our budget planning process. I'm sure at the school board convention there will be quite a few discussions about the state budget as well. Just something to be monitoring. We did include it for your review, and any board member is always welcome to share any feedback back through the budget committee if there's any comments. We did take a look at enrollment projection scenarios for next school year. We have found that looking at a particular model, which is called a 5-year average, has been the most accurate model for budget planning purposes. So the budget committee did have a chance to take a look at several different options and did indicate support for continuing to use that model that we've used in the past. For any board members who are interested in looking at it further, the attachment is included in your board book, and at any point I'd be more than happy to talk with any board members about that. We spent the most amount of time at the meeting on the next agenda item, which is the November 8th referendum financial plan update. So for members of the community who might be viewing this, tonight we're not going to take a long period of time to go through the presentation because we did that at the budget committee meeting. We spent quite a bit of time on it. So any community member who really wants a little bit of the background on the financial planning that's taken place over the last couple of school years, they're welcome to take a look at this presentation because it does provide that information. For board members tonight, we're going to invite Eric Cass up from PMA. Eric was at the budget committee meeting. The budget committee members did indicate a preference for how we plan the borrowing surrounding the November 8th referendum. Eric's going to talk about that preference that the budget committee members shared and make sure the other board members who aren't on the budget committee also have an opportunity to get any questions asked, because that preference really sets the stage for how we choose to issue the remaining portion of the debt throughout this referendum planning process. So I'm just going to introduce Eric again to the board and just turn it over to Eric to really talk about, at a high level, that planning process. Eric?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. As Steve alluded to, one of your action items is the first step, which we talked through, which is a bank qualified note, and just very high level, and I'll talk more about it. It provides incentives to get a lower interest rate, and I'll cover that when we get to that item. As we get into the next phase, to Steve's point, we really looked at a lot of different angles in approaching this, and really some of the guiding principles that we always use. Number one is we need to make sure that there's cash in the bank to meet the financial obligations of the construction project. So we get a draw schedule, it's called, and we want to make sure that when we are borrowing and have intended borrowings over sequential years, that there's enough cash in the bank. So that's priority number one. Number two, we're looking at it from an angle on hedging against future interest rate risk. We talked a lot about history over the last 20 years of interest rates at the committee level. We looked at a couple of different charts and really focused in on, since the beginning of 2022, how much volatility there's been. If you pay attention to the news, the Fed Reserve is all over the front page and continues to be as they try to stave off inflation. So that was number two. And then the third one was looking at it from the angle of providing future property tax levy flexibility for the current board and future boards that would have that ability to kind of monitor and manage eloquently the property tax impact from one year to the next. And what it really boiled down to is looking at the next phase of the referendum and looking at it in a lens of issuing something that is a little bit different than a historical approach, which here in Wisconsin, general obligation debt is normally issued over a 20-year period. You'll issue your debt, you'll lock in your interest rates, and 7 to 9 years later, you'll have the ability to refund that with what's called a call feature. So the other option that we really talked a lot about was issuing a 5-year promissory note with the intention in lowering the interest rate exposure, because we're borrowing over a shorter period of time and interest rates for 5 years are lower than 10 or 20 years. But then also providing the ability for the school board after the first year to look at locking in a long-term rate at a more appropriate time. My earlier comments that we talked a lot about were how interest rates are much higher than they have been over the last 2 to 3 years. And there's a lot of noise in the economy as it relates to what is going to happen when inflation does come under control. And if you look at history, recessions begin to set in at some point in time as money is really expensive. So the idea and the concept with the next step that we talked about at the committee level is providing the necessary funds, $120 million, to meet the financial obligations all the way through 2025, but then providing a locked-in interest rate for a 5-year period of time. And the flexibility would come after the first year where the board could refund that because it would have a 1-year call feature versus a 7 or a 9-year and a 20-year issue. And you would have the ability to call that and lock in long-term rates anytime between 12 months and 60 months. Now it's important to understand, and I stress this at the committee level, that the risk factor is you have to lock in rates at 60 months if you so choose not to between 12 months and 60 months. So once that call feature kicks in, if interest rates don't decrease or don't decline or don't come at a level that is of interest, and we'll monitor that up, of course, on behalf of the school board in collaboration with Steve and his team, you would be required to refund that 5-year promissory note at the end of those 5 years. Is there anything I missed that you would highlight?
No, and if I could, I'd turn it over to Jack, who can share the perspective that he had, and then the other committee members, as far as what the committee members expressed as a preference.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. One of the things that we talked about was going with the $10 million bank qualified debt, because what that would do is give us the flexibility to really watch where the interest rates are going to go. Because, you know, as has been alluded, the Fed is out there trying to stave off inflation, and with that, you know, they're probably going to, the interest rates, the municipal rates are probably going to come down. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball, but it gives us the flexibility to really lock in potentially lower interest rates and make the program more feasible as we go forward.
That's really for the 120 million, not the 10 million.
Right.
Correct.
The 120 million is that 5-year kind of lower interest rate that we can refinance at any time, which, as Jack said, gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of money in the bank to pay bills.
And we wanted to put the topic in front of the budget committee for planning in 2023 and beyond. And really it comes down to a preference for issuing either bonds, which are the 20-year long-term borrowings that are locked in for, let's say, 7 to 9 years, or issuing notes, which are at a lower cost today and gives the board the ability to then take them out as longer-term bonds anywhere between that year 1 and 5. So organizations that, let's say, do not want to have any interest rate risk might prefer to lock in as much of the funds as possible right away for the full 20 years. Based on our modeling, that is one of the more expensive options over the life of the borrowing. Or if an organization is willing to be more flexible and willing to take the view that potentially rates will come down, maybe it wouldn't be in 2023, but maybe it would be in 2024, mid-year, end year, then you could take that opportunity to then lock in those borrowings over that period of time. So we wanted to really understand from the board members on the budget committee what their thoughts were. And in general, the preference was to go the note route, which would provide more flexibility and provide the board with the opportunity to come back to this at another time to lock those rates in. So I just want to make sure to the other 4 board members who weren't a part of that conversation, do any questions cross your mind that you might want to ask Eric while he's here as far as thinking for 2023 and beyond?
I'd like to just add that taking the 120 up front, what we're not using is going to would be invested at a conservative level, so we don't lose money, but so that we can actually increase, get money back from what we have, which can help pay off the loan later on.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Mark did bring that up during the budget committee. There's really 2 different approaches that could be taken, or a combination of the 2 with the interest earnings. Interest earnings can be utilized towards the project itself. Interest earnings can be used towards the debt service or payment of the loan, or some of both. And we did talk about that as well, so thanks for mentioning that. Do any of the other 4 board members who weren't on the budget committee have any questions about 2023 and beyond that you would want Eric to address for you tonight?
I think one of the things that we've been doing is really being conscious of interest rates. you know, and I think there's a perception out in the community that because we went out for a $175 million referendum, we're gonna take that today and put it in the bank and spend that over 5 years. It's not what our plan is, and our plan is to be as conservative and judicious with these funds so that we can minimize the interest expense as we go forward.
And to follow that up, one of the things that actually Ally and Eric and I were talking about today is if we are able to schedule a budget committee meeting in the first week in January, and based on the feedback we did receive by the budget committee, Eric and his team can keep dialing this in, and we could bring back to the budget committee in the first week in January a plan that we would recommend for 2023. The plans that were included in the PowerPoint were really designed to try to get high-level feedback on the concept of really notes or bonds. Now that we've had that feedback, we'd have that ability to really dial in a specific plan. Eric and his team will need to make sure that we would be borrowing according to all IRS requirements for what's called, the use of the funds. There's 2-year spending requirements for the interest that's earned. So we would do all that and bring that back for the budget committee meeting in January and continue to spend some time working on this. If there really isn't any other questions, we will then jump into the agenda item, which is down under administrative reports. That's the action item for this evening. And a couple of things that I just want to note on this. The first is that when we move forward with a borrowing like this, that borrowing is rated by an independent rating agency. In the recent past, our district has used a firm called Moody's. Board members are aware of the fact that in the spring of '21, Moody's downgraded the debt of the district. What Moody's indicated at the time was concern over our fund balance. We did bring that forward to the board that summer, the board changed our policy on Fund 41, which is the fund we were using for capital maintenance. And that fall, the board shifted those funds back into Fund 10. The budget committee has had a concerted effort over the last 2 years to increase our fund balance with the understanding that if we did have a successful referendum, we would be at this point where we would be able to do a borrowing and we would have another review. Eric did recommend going down a little bit of a different path for this borrowing, and I would like Eric just to explain a little bit why and how that turned out.
Yep. So if you took some time to look at the reports, you're going to see S&P Global Rating. So there's 2 major rating agencies. There's actually 3, but nobody uses the third one, Fitch. So S&P and Moody's are the 2 most popular for municipal entities when they're issuing debt or refunding debt. And what we know about S&P is their rating methodology really leverages local socioeconomic factors more heavily. And Waunakee has very strong socioeconomic factors as being a surrounding community for Madison, and a lot of the different economic factors we look at, from property valuation to earning potential, to all of those different metrics. We also know that they look a little bit differently at fund balance in comparison to Moody's. And so when we did kind of our own internal scorecard, we are not the rating agency, but we kind of understand how their different categories work. We really felt that Waunakee was going to be able to increase their rating. And just putting that into perspective, because this question normally comes up, when Moody's downgraded you by 2 notches, when you're going to access the market, that's probably between a 30 and 40 basis point cost to the school district. So every rating category is about 10 to 20 basis points. And so what the good news is here that Steve's talking about is we were able to increase. So Moody's and S&P have like categories. They're not the same. But you were A1 in Moody's, and now you're AA minus, which is 1 category higher on S&P. If Moody's would have rated you 1 category higher, would have been the same. So, I mean, it's not exact, but you can think about it in terms of about a 10 to 20 basis point improvement. And a lot of that is not just the rating categories, but Ally and Steve giving them kudos, do a really, really good job on explaining the qualities of the school district, the financial oversight that the board has, the different reports and ways that we look at as a board, the financial metrics that are shown. And so it's not just about things out of your control. There's a lot that they're able to highlight as well.
So just note that that has occurred. You will see the report in there. That's a real positive. I think it's a positive reflection on the financial leadership of the board, looking at that last report from Moody's, making that change in anticipation of where we might be today. So that's a real positive. That's important to share with the community. And then the borrowing itself, back in the summer, if you recall, Eric was here and shared the idea that our first borrowing would have the opportunity to be bank qualified, which gives us a little bit of a better interest rate opportunity. We can only do up to $10 million a year using that format. And so therefore our cash flow borrowing this fall was designed in a way to allow us to do this. So Eric will then share the results of that process today with you.
Yep. If you wouldn't mind opening the sales summary of the fourth attachment, just to walk through that. So as Steve said, we did a competitive sale at 10 a.m. this morning, and competitive sale is a platform where it's blind and respondents can put in their single best interest rate indication. And when that all comes together, you'll see the results on the second slide if you wouldn't mind going down. So we were very happy with the results. There were, as you can see, 6 respondents. The winning bidder, as recommended, is Piper Sandler and Company. The original intention was to issue $9,990,000, but what we found through the process is you are capped at that $10 million, and that includes everything. And we found that the district entered into a tax-exempt lease for about $17,000. So that's why you see it footnoted at the bottom. The downsized borrowing is at $9,990,000 to make sure that we stay in compliance of those bank qualified rules. And bank qualified provides incentives to banks to lower that interest rate by providing some federal tax incentives for them to do so. And again, we're very happy getting under 4% with the rate. We keep going down. You can see the layout here. So this is the first phase of the 2022 referendum. One of the unique pieces of this borrowing is that if you look at the principal maturities date, they are not until April of 2036 to 2042. Current interest rate environment when issuing 20-term debt on the bank qualified side, there is value, but it's really in years about 14 through 20. So that's why we have backloaded principal on this, and then we'll begin to fill in some of the shorter amortizations on some of the non-bank qualified debt, where the value is there on the short end of the yield curve versus where the value is here on the long end of the yield curve. The first interest payment will be April of 2023, so this spring, and then the call date on these are April 1st of 2032, so a 9-year call on this issuance. S&P ratings AA-, there's no insurance, and again, winning bidder is Piper Sandler and Company. Very small, I apologize, but if you have your binoculars, you can see that this is the first step in the process inside the box. To Jack's earlier comments, we're not intending to access $175 million day one. This is intended to happen over a 4 to 5 year period in alignment with the cash flow of the project. And you can see that the first $20 million is intended to come forward maybe in January or February, depending upon the conversation at the budget committee and how that transpires here in early January. And then with that, I don't need to read you that, but we're required to show you that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We have included in board book the updated resolution. So what you did see last week was a resolution that was a draft without the actual amounts in there. The sale took place this morning. Rebecca put the new one in there that actually had the results of the sale that Eric just showed you. So just so you know, the little difference between what was in your packet and Rebecca has the actual one in there with the results of the sale today.
And you would like us to approve this, or it's done?
So we are requesting approval
Okay.
of that resolution this evening, and then Rebecca also received a packet from Quarles and Brady, the bond attorneys, with requesting signatures as well tonight, if approved by the board.
Okay. So,
Motion to
any
approve.
questions? Otherwise, I would take a motion to approve this.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you very much, Eric and Steve and Ally, and putting this together and getting us started.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, I'm sure I'll be back. Have a good
We'll
evening
see a
on
lot of
Saturday.
you in the next couple of years.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Now we're going to scoot back up to the top of the committee, and I think we're starting with policy.
Policy. We have not a whole lot of them. Again, going through our, looking at the 300 series, I think we can turn it back over to Randy and
Yep.
talk about them.
Sounds good. We have a few of them in front of you tonight. I'm just gonna walk them through as they're listed, and then for each of the agenda items, then we can vote on those independently. So the first one, I believe, the way we have it listed is we're looking at the Title I policies. There's actually two of them there. One of them is with regards to this Title I programming in general, and the other one is related to the family engagement guidelines. Title I is a program it's a federal program. It's an entitlement program based on qualifications as far as enrollment and poverty levels within your school district. It's not a program that we always receive, but we've been receiving it for probably 10 years or more, and we need to have policies that address that. So what you'll see in your packet tonight is just really replacing what we've had there with more more modern language around the Title I requirements. And there's really nothing that's really hugely of substance there. That's really more just articulating who's in charge of that. Our Director of Elementary Curriculum Instruction, Amy Johnson, is in charge of really overseeing the Title I program. We've articulated that in there. And then these are policies that are just required as we have a program as such. So our recommendation would be to approve the policy 242.5 and its associated rule.
So moved.
Second.
Jack, and you got somebody. Any questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay.
All right. And the next one, we're taking two of these together again. We're taking independent educational evaluations and the associated rule with that. And this is actually something that is associated with special education. Tiffany Loken was involved in reviewing this policy. And what we are doing is looking to replace that with the PRG model that was recommended. We've also addressed some of the pieces with regards to the costs associated with it, the ones that were initially placed in the PRG, just based on some experience that Tiffany had in looking at this, and for a student that we've been working with, she felt we needed to address that and change it from $500 to $2,000. Independent evaluations are not something we deal with a lot, but it is something that is required within federal law as far as special education, so we need to have a policy that addresses it, and our recommendation would be to approve the policy and the associated rule.
So moved?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right.
Okay. All right, now as we look at the technical college and early college credit programs, we've lumped these two together as well. Think of this as we have students that have maxed out of our programs at our high school. They do have the ability per state law to also take classes at the tech college or at the university. You've heard this for those of you who've been on the board previously, things like youth options, et cetera. That program has been replaced now with the technical college course program and the early college credit program. We do have a cap of 18 credits that a student is able to receive through that. And I believe this is, that was a piece that we had discussed with the board in a previous iterations. So with that, we are looking for approval of our technical college course program and the early college credit program. Both of these are required for us to have policies on.
How does this change from what we've got in policy right now?
It really doesn't. It's pretty much exactly what we have right now generally. This is just bringing it up to date with some of the, probably a little bit better language, Jack, but it really doesn't drastically change anything we're doing. You still have to bring those to the board. You still have to have a certain percentage of difference between the course we offer and the one that would be offered at the university or at the tech college. That gets vetted out within our system and in our administration, but I don't see anything within these policies that's considerably different.
So we have a motion by Katie and second by Mark. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. All right.
And just to kind of keep you up to speed, we have our tutoring services policy. We are just going to keep that as is. So at this point, there is no action, I believe, that we need on that. Just to kind of keep you up to speed as we kind of work our way through the policies. The adult education one is one that we just feel that we can repeal. We have the ability to address that without having a formalized policy on it. And as we review that, we don't believe that a policy is necessary. We also have students, if they came back to us, excuse me, we would kick them over to the technical college system because they offer really those type of programs that would be allowed for them to receive their high school equivalency diplomas if somebody were to return after they left us. So our recommendation for this one is to repeal the adult education policy.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
that concludes all of our policies. I appreciate the committee and Ted being part of that. We'll keep moving. It's a little bit slower as they get a little bit more in detail, and we have another meeting, I believe, on Thursday. So.
Next is the facility committee. The first item is really just information. Our baseball coach is going to be looking at doing something similar to what our softball team did last year, putting some banners on the inside of the fence. We have one action item, no, two action items, I guess. One is with Warrior Pitch, the scoreboard. Dave Kettner came to the committee meeting and proposed installation and purchasing of a new scoreboard. The WAVE, his fundraising has enough money already set aside for this, so it really is just approving that generous donation by that committee.
So move.
Second.
Any questions on that?
Is this, that's both boys and girls?
Yep.
Yes,
Same field.
yes, yes, it does. Good question.
For the sake of the public, I think it's worth noting, we're looking at 18,000 for the scoreboard and another 2,500 for the install, so it really is a generous gift from the
Yes.
community.
Yeah, the community is continuing to fund that soccer program.
Yeah, we kept the original scoreboard there when we did the last renovations of the field, but it's really right now come to end of life, so it's time to move on.
And the scoreboard that they're purchasing is the Dektronic, the same as the football stadium is using, so I think it will be easy for John to kind of keep track of maintenance and upkeep. So we have a motion on the table. Did we get a second?
Second.
Any other questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you.
Steve, were you looking for anything about baseball?
It's up to the board. The recommendation is there to move forward with the same approach. I mean, the board could approve it.
For the fundraising
Does the policy say that the committee approves it, or does the board approve it for
Board approves it.
fundraising?
Oh, I guess we did make a recommendation.
Right.
I thought it was more of information, yeah,
Right.
thank you, I missed that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this was for the baseball program to do something very similar to raise funds for, similar to how we approved for softball. There's no, right now, any project requests associated with it. It's really to raise funds for some of the things that they view as needs, and then those would be moving forward as appropriate to the board. So utilizing the advertising and those pieces on the fence, very similar to how softball is.
And I think we made a kind of a stipulation on that because it would present potentially putting it on the exterior fence so that you could see it coming on cue there. And I think we said no to that, to keep it on the inside so
That's
that it
right.
didn't turn into this advertising.
That's right.
So we would need approval of allowing them to do that fundraising similar to what softball has done.
So moved. Second.
Any questions on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the last item is looking at,
Just coming back here, that motion did include that we're not going to put,
right,
Yes.
right.
okay.
I think Mike is going to bring that back if he investigates that and would
Right.
like to do that.
Correct.
So the last item is to look at moving ahead with some facility projects, specifically softball lights, the high school library furniture, and the Warrior Stadium bleacher expansion, and moving that so that that can be ready for spring and beginning those projects now. And Steve, I don't know if you want to talk about the funding of that. It will come out of referendum money or?
Yes, these projects would be funded by a referendum. The one thing I do want to just note for the board members who weren't on the facility committee, that the recommendation is to move forward with the planning process, and ultimately the bids themselves would have to be presented to the full board for approval, as the dollar amounts will exceed the level that administration could approve. That's $25,000 and above in board policy. And so we are only looking for approval to proceed with the planning, and ultimately the bids for these projects would have to be brought back through the full board. And these would be the first projects that we would be moving forward that aren't particularly the new school itself. These are some of the other projects that were presented to the community during the referendum planning process. The presentation that it's in there, we weren't intending to go through that tonight, but really outlines those projects. We had some estimated timeframes, and we talked about the facility maintenance part of it as well. These are just the ones that we believe we could move forward in a timely manner and potentially impact next, in 2023, have some of these accomplished by the time we get these programs ready for the next time that they're being used.
So the committee did review these and did approve 3-0, moving it to the full board. And I would take a motion.
So moved.
Second. Any other questions on what we're
So-
proposing?
This is all in the referendum
Uh-huh.
plan from there. What are we talking about with the track renovation? Is that behind the heritage?
No, this
No.
this is the current track, and there are some things that need to be addressed on that track for it. We renovated it a few years ago, we redid the surface. It's now coming to the point where there's also some underlayment pieces that are causing us some challenges the last few years. So as we are looking at already being in the stadium with the bleachers, we would like to also correct the track issues that we're having moving forward.
And it was, from what they told us, preventing us from like having any kind of qualifying matches or
Right.
because the lanes, they couldn't get,
She was losing, I think, one full
yeah.
lane.
using
Yeah,
those,
there was
so.
also, there's some dips that we've had to deal with, there's some lifting of it.
Some filling
So
that's not
there's
happening.
definitely some pieces that have need to, is when we resurfaced it before, we didn't do the under part, not using the base of it.
Yeah.
So this is a piece to really redo it and get it to where it needs to be.
Is it going to require a total resurfacing?
I think it's a total rebuild, isn't it, Steve?
Probably.
It's total rebuild.
Total rebuild. So while we're there doing things, we might as well do all of that. We're trying to stage things so that when we are in a location, we can do the things that are associated with it. So that would really fall under kind of a maintenance project that we're kind of looking at to really make sure that that can be done at the same time that we're already going to be disturbing that area.
And there was measurement issues with it.
The hurdles.
Yep,
Oh,
so
yeah, the
lane-
hurdles.
The lane
There's a
width
lot
will
of- lot
definitely
of issues
be done correctly.
Yeah, previous contract.
I was gonna say, was that a design issue or was it a previous contract issue? Bill? Or is it just how old's the track?
Since the football.
6 years, 5, 6 years.
How many years?
5 or 6 years. The resurfacing of it is.
But
Oh, the track.
when they built,
The
they
track.
did the base.
Oh, the base
back in
was.
84 maybe?
Boy, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or whenever they built the stadium up there.
Yeah, quite a while.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second, right, Rebecca? So any other concerns? All in favor of those projects moving forward for at least getting bid, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And that is the end of facility. Moving on to curriculum committee.
So for the curriculum committee, Tim and Amy reviewed the annual school report card and data for us, and Tim's here to review that data with us tonight. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Katie. And it looks like Rebecca is already one step ahead of me in bringing up our slide deck. Here we go.
And the clicker is by Steve Summers, if you'd like to use it.
May I, Steve?
Tim?
Okay. Thank you. So, as a publicly funded public school district, when local school districts receive state dollars, receive federal dollars, there are certain accountability mechanisms that accompany those funding streams. And the most significant one for us in most areas is state accountability through the report cards. And so they come out in the fall, and we recently received them for the district and each of our schools, except for our 4K program, which doesn't meet the criteria to have a report card issued. So again, these documents are required under the state and federal requirements in Wisconsin. We also use them locally as a data for school improvement. It's the state sometimes using external vendors with some special qualifications to present the data in ways that we could not otherwise ourselves present it. And also because it's a process that's carried out across the state, allows us to make objective comparisons of our report card measures with those of other school districts and other schools in the state. The two key takeaways from this year's set of report cards is that our overall performance is strong. As you may have seen, our total report card score for the district is the highest in Dane County, continues to be the highest, I might add. And within our benchmark group, which is a set of districts, we'll see those later, that are the most like us in the state, we are in the upper half of the total score in our statewide benchmark group. An area that does have our attention is our growth. Growth is one of the performance areas in the report card. Historically, we have been above average in that area. Now, growth is a unique measure. I mean, average growth means you're staying on pace. Thinking about it from a student perspective, above average growth means you're moving up. Historically, we've had, at a district level, above average growth. That's declined compared to previous years on the current report card. Now we're more at an average level of growth. So that definitely has our attention. Even though all of the report cards look on the surface very similar across each of the report cards, it's important to note, and I'll show you where to look for this in the report cards in just a moment, that the process of completing the total score is complex, and it varies by the level of the school. So like elementary schools aren't graded on grade duration, for example, and high schools aren't graded on third grade ELA. But they're also calculated based on the low income percentage of the school. And so none of our schools are calculated with exactly the same weights. It looks the same, but how you get there varies a little bit. So schools and districts receive an index score on a range from 0 to 100. That's not a percent correct measurement, so you might not think about that the way that you might see a test coming back for your student. It is based very heavily on the state assessments, which doesn't measure everything we value as a district. However, the state assessments are high quality. They're aligned to standards in ELA and mathematics, and we do take the information they convey very seriously. So the report cards are based on performance in 4 priority areas designated by the state. Student achievement in English language arts and mathematics on the state assessments. Student growth, which I was just referring to, also on the state assessments. A target group, which is the performance of our lowest 25% of local performance. You do have to have 20 students in that group to generate a reportable score. So one thing, if you were to look at our 3 elementary schools, they did not meet that threshold for, I think partly due to the size of our elementary schools, the grade span of our elementary schools, and again, some pandemic effects. And then the last of the 4 priority areas is the on track to graduation and post-secondary readiness. Very important area. The 4 components of that, not present in every school, but certainly present for the district, are 3rd grade ELA, 8th grade mathematics, student attendance, and the graduation rate. So as you can see, ELA and mathematics heavily based as the foundation for these scores. Schools and districts are then on that 0 to 100 scale, ranked in 5 levels. All of our schools, including the district, exceeded or significantly exceeded expectations. You know, even though it's a sophisticated measuring system, schools and districts with smaller sizes can have some more random variability. So something, if you look back at presentations over the years, we've looked at where do we stand among K-12 districts that have enrollments of at least 1,300 students in grades K through 12. There are currently 145 such districts in Wisconsin, and our total score was 12th out of those 145. So if you go into some of the extra attachments in the agenda, or you go back and look at the curriculum committee meeting, you will see all of our report cards, including the district report card. You can get them off the district website, you can get them from the DPI website. But what we've done here is we've taken some screenshots of some key sections, not so much to see the finer points on here, but more to the point to be able to just kind of explain the layout. So this would be the top page for a report card. At the top, it's the only part of the report card we have direct control over. There's a brief textual statement where we provide a little bit of information about the district and each of our schools. Right below that is a section as part of the district information that shows our demographic breakdown, both for race and ethnicity, English language learners, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students. So that's the top part of the first page in every report card. In the middle section are the calculation weights. And you may remember just a few minutes ago I said every school, every district gets there a little differently. That pie chart you see in the middle of the report card shows you what percent of the total score is coming from each of the 4 categories. And then at the bottom, you see those 4 priority areas. So you get to that 80.7, not by averaging each of the 4 priority areas equally. You arrive at that 80.7 by taking each of those priority areas and weighting them based on that pie chart in the middle. This is what we would see for the achievement page. Now again, as you go through these documents, there's a little more detail after these first pages, but if you go to the achievement section, again, you'll see the score at the top, For these areas, you'll also see a histogram that will kind of show the distribution of scores in the state, and then the column or the bin that the school or district falls into is highlighted, so you can see where we compare in this priority area across the state. You have disaggregated data by different groups in the middle. Again, low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learners, race and ethnicity, wherever we get to 20 or more. And we get to 20 or more, a lot more at the district level than we might for an elementary school. And then at the bottom, you can see performance levels on the state assessment, because this is the achievement, and this is entirely derived from the state assessment. The growth section, very similar in the upper half to what we just saw on the achievement section. You see a score, you see your distribution. You can see, as I mentioned, we are solidly in the middle of the distribution. And then below, the disaggregation is a little more complicated or another way is it conveys more information than the disaggregation for the achievement does. So the state uses a highly sophisticated statistical process that they outsource to a vendor to calculate the growth. And the best way to think of it is you're roughly on a 0 to 6 point scale where 3 is the middle of the distribution. So if you think about a normal curve, 3 is the middle, 0 is 3 standard deviations to the left. You'd rather not be drifting to the left. And the 6 is 3 standard deviations to the right. And you wouldn't mind moving more towards the right. And so when you look at this disaggregation, you can see at the top where the district stands as a whole, as a total, and then for each disaggregated group where we had enough students to make the comparison, you can see that broken down, and if it is on the middle or to the right, it goes dark. If it goes to the left, it goes lighter. And that's a very quick way to see how the different groups stand. One positive is you're not seeing a lot of variation in terms of outcome here based on who the kids are. So while we're interested in seeing that growth score move up, the good news is we don't have any single group that's particularly lagging in growth. So we can't say our English learners are lagging, or we can't say our low-income students are in particular lagging in growth. So that's a good thing. This is the target group. This is only the second year in having the target group. This is the one section where you see a score on the state average at the top. But then in the bottom section, instead of comparing our target group to other target groups, since the bottom 25% is a different snapshot from district to district, school to school, instead, what the state does here on the report card is it shows the performance of your target group compared to the school or district overall. And again, what you're looking for is stronger outcomes or less disadvantageous outcomes, at least, for your target group over time. These are the students that need the most support. We invest a lot of effort in supporting these students towards success. They often do have more needs for support, and this tracks our progress in impacting this group of students. And last but not least, for the on track, you see where we compare to the state, above average, and then you can see each of the 4 components that relate to that. And so that's the layout for the district and all of our schools. Now there are some areas of that that will look differently depending on the school. Elementary schools won't have any graduation data. The high school won't have any 3rd grade ELA data, and so forth. So how does this look compared to some of the groups that we like to compare ourselves to? This is a very simple table. It shows the total and the 4 priority areas at the top. That's our score. There are 16 districts in Dane County. You see our rank within the 16 districts. High overall, high for on track, high for achievement. Growth in target group, less so. For our benchmark group of 22 districts statewide, and you can see the districts we compare ourselves to at the bottom. That's based on primarily size and demographics. You can see that we're in the upper half at 9 out of 22 overall achievement, 6 out of 22 growth, 19 out of 22. That is a concern. And then the target group and the on track. And by way of comparison, if you took that growth and you went back to 2019, that would have been, instead of 65.1, just kind of pull this up here quickly, that would have been a 70, that would have been a 77.4. So that's a bit of a decline. And we would have been second in Dane County in 2019, sixth out of this group at the state level in 2019, in the growth category. Now, again, both years we were number 1 overall in Dane County for the total score, and our position in the benchmark group 3 years ago, we were 7 out of 22, now we're 9 out of 22. So the overall hasn't changed, but that growth is definitely something we need to be working on, and we are. If we go a little further in.
Tim, before you
Sure, Jack.
go, why do you think this has declined?
You know, that's a good question. I think there's 2 things that are going on. Our score and growth has declined. Partly what you see, particularly in the benchmark group, is some districts really moved up in growth. There were some districts, particularly in our benchmark group, that were maxed out on the growth measure, which is very difficult to accomplish at the school level and very, very difficult to accomplish at the district level. It's possible there could be some factors related to non-participation and variations in performance over the pandemic. This is a multi-year score that might have led to some anomalies in the measure, but this is a measure that's calculated at a pretty large scale. So I think just from a precautionary principle, we need to assume it's real and not a statistical artifact and act accordingly. Something that could happen here is the composition of our students that take these tests a little different than our overall composition. Again, this is not as simple as here's your pre-test, here's your post-test. It's a multi-level statistical model that adjusts for certain demographic pieces. So we know we have some groups, like students with disabilities, that, we know we have a non-participation issue, but in particular for students with disabilities, they had a lower participation rate. And those students will have a different adjustment in this calculation than a student without disability. So it's possible that there could have been some technical issues there. But again, this is something that's happening at the state level, and we're seeing peer districts that did not have similar movement. So I think that's why we need to focus on this.
What are we doing to focus on it, I guess?
So I think, the first thing is, depending on the school, you're seeing some focus on extra supports, the academic support programs. At the middle school, we've made some adjustments to the math intervention model, both for, there'd be a reading score, not an ELA score, both in reading and math, for example, on the iReady. We are using that more thoroughly this year to provide students with more independent practice time on that, which goes on outside of class. One thing we'll be doing for some of our schools is looking at some of our benchmark districts that had pretty sterling results on the report card. We were starting to look at that coming out of the state assessments. We'll be doing some site visits to those in the second half of the year to compare some of their practices to ours, whether it's schedule, whether it's instructional materials, use of instructional time, expectations in different areas, to see what some differences are. That's kind of the advantage of doing benchmark work, is to be able to look at other people's practices and see if there's anything that's different that merits attention. Those would just be a few things off the top. We could certainly bring more information back to.
And all of these benchmark districts didn't have the same same percentage of the different categories, is that correct? So we had a pretty small chunk of ours associated to growth on that overall score, right?
Right, so, I mean,
At
one thing,
6.5%.
one reason why we can swing so much in the growth and not swing so much on the overall rating is all of these districts have like us, have fairly low numbers of economically disadvantaged students. And if we were to go back and look at that pie chart, when you are a district with a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students, or a school with a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students, growth weights heavily and achievement rates lower. For a district like us, and really like these other 22, achievement has a much bigger weight in the scoring, and that's just a policy decision the state has made. So for all of us here, swings in growth get muted in their impact on the final score, but that doesn't mean for our purposes, growth is only 6% of what we look at. We look at growth a lot, we think it's very important. I think, so again, that's why we do compare against a similar group here. Now again, you know, to kind of build on my answer with Jack earlier, if you were to look at these 22 benchmark districts, we would be 22nd out of 22nd on test participation. So, you know, that does stand out too. So again, could there be some way that our data is a little different and it's kind of cascading through? Don't want to totally dismiss it, but we also wouldn't want to take our foot off the gas just because we think there could be something in there. Much better to focus on making improvements, and then if there was a technical piece too, that's even better.
Does test participation affect our achievement?
No, it does not. It used to. Prior to the last adjustment in the state report card system, you could have, you were expected to have a certain level of participation, and if you didn't have that, your opt-outs counted as below basic. But the last 2 times out, your achievement is only derived from the students that take the test.
Okay.
Which is one reason why our achievement stayed relatively strong, because if we're scored under the old system, it might have looked a little, it would have looked different. So schools at a glance, this is how our 6 schools performed. I think the one thing to kind of note here is the target group. We weren't able to calculate that. I shouldn't say we. The state was not able to calculate that for 3 elementary schools due to size, due to the fact we only have 2 tested grades, because of our grade configuration, and a little bit of pandemic non-participation. Breaking it down, this just takes the slide from 2 slides ago and breaks it down a little more by math and ELA and some of the components. And again, we just use this to get a little better sense of, you know, where we are in a relatively advantageous position and where we have areas we need to look at a little more carefully. The last, yes, Mark?
So again, as we look at these, it's hard to not think about it as a percentage, but as a grade or a rating.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd like to say, the committee is extremely concerned with the results. It's nice to see us 1, 2 in Dane County, 3 in the benchmark group, but as a committee, we're very much aware that just slightly less than 50% of all of our students are below proficient. And that's the ongoing concern and focus of our committee.
And we'll be bringing back some information on our support programs later in the year. But, you know, in the point of circling back, just to add an information, when I said earlier, you can't look at the scores, even though they're on a 0 to 100 scale, exactly as you would look at a test. Just for a moment, just because I think it illustrates this, I'm going to mention the target group achievement breakout. And you can see of all of the numbers up there, the target group achievement is our lowest score at 43.4. Yet it's first in Dane County out of 16. It's 3 in the benchmark group out of 22. So at first glance you might say, well, that that seems a little strange, what's going on there? And so I think it's important to know that for the target group achievement, that's looking at achievement, which is how you calculate your advanced, your proficiency, and your basics. A below basic gets 0 points, a basic gets 0.5, a proficient gets 1, and an advanced gets a 1.5. And when you're looking at your students that need the most support, they're going to be, by selection, in a lower scoring grouping than your group as a whole. So that rolls up to an index score, it's a very low score, and certainly one of the big things we focus on is getting that score higher. But I think it's important to recognize that that one area is going to be oriented a little lower. Likewise, for a district like us, something like district attendance overall is almost always going to be fairly high. And ours is at 98.2, and it also ranks pretty well. So it's, again, it's important, I think, and that's one reason why we do the rankings, is if we were to just go by the top line scores, you might draw different conclusions than you would get by looking at your ranks within districts that you're familiar with. Last but not least, just to kind of step back, the state report cards, again, allow us to make comparisons over time, comparisons among different districts, and so it might be of interest just to kind of see where some of our demographic indicators compare. And so you can see, our trend of becoming a little more diverse over time. We see continued enrollment growth over time. This is our 9th year of having state report cards. Well, actually the 10th year, but we'll get into a decade here in a moment. And you can also see within Dane County and also within our benchmark group how we compare. And I do think, one thing when we do look at our relative performance as we compare across these two groups, percent of economically disadvantaged, when you're 16th out of 16th, that means we have the fewest economically disadvantaged pupils in Dane County of the 16 districts. And within the 22 districts in our benchmark group, we have the second lowest percentage of economically disadvantaged students, with only Whitefish Bay having a lower percentage below that. So again, that's just to kind of put some of this in context. And probably more than you wanted about report cards, but if you want even more, go to the extras in the agenda. And if you have questions about specific schools in the district, Amy and I would be happy to connect with you separately. And as Mark said, we're going to be bringing back additional information and updates to the curriculum committee over the rest of the year. That's something we work closely with Katie as chair for that.
Thank you very much, Tim. Any questions for Tim? Thank you.
Tim.
Next, we have DEI committee.
Nothing for us to approve, just an update on what we're doing. We got an update on the reporting tool for students who have felt they've been bullied or picked on and or harassed. And what we've saw for this year, so far the numbers are significantly lower than last year, but comparing first quarter to last quarter, a number of things are involved with that. One, they're now need to put their name on when they make one of the online reports. That could have discouraged people. There's ideas, well, this is the first time the tool is out there, so there's an unusual amount of participation compared to a normal time into the school year versus start of the school year. So we're not sure yet what that all means. As we get more data in the second, third, and fourth quarter, we'll be able to see a little bit more what the overall situations are in terms of reportings that way. We had an update on the belonging workshop, and at this point, the target is February or March. Lastly, we were going through a final review of our own DEI recommendations from the initial group and our response to them. We want to encourage all of you to get yours to us by April 1st, but if you get them earlier, that'd even be better, so we can put a total report together.
Okay, thank you. And we did budget, so we are at HR.
Well, we had some good news. You wanna come up and share?
HR always says
Good news, good news.
So we have two items for the board today. The first is indeed really unexpected good news, in that the Department of Health Services is offering a one-time grant for use during the 22-23 school year for boosting and supporting health staff and health services in schools. And so they do have some pretty strict parameters about how it can be used. And that was one, within the information that was provided. It really came down to kind of three areas. You could take part-time staff and use this funding to make them full-time staff. You could hire additional full-time staff. Both of those were only, again, this money is only for use and only coming to us this school year. Or the third option is to take the money and offer it for retention purposes to your current staff. And so based on the staffing that we have, where we're full-time assistant in every building, we have 2 nurses that are spread across the district. We thought it really was the best plan to use this for retention purposes and provide it to our staff in terms of retention bonuses. And the document that was provided to you kind of shows how that's split. We did take some consideration of the person's role. Obviously, school nurses are, as we're all aware, healthcare workers are very hard to come by, very competitive market right now. Nurses that can work in a school are just like the nurses that are needed in hospitals and healthcare. And so we are in competition, so we did give that some consideration when we distributed the grant money. And we also took a look at the longevity of staff and were they with us through the totality of the COVID experience. And those that were with us over those 2 to 3 years, 2.5 years, got we are proposing a bigger slice of the grant. I guess are there any questions from any board members?
So is this a one-time bonus, or is it something that once we give it, we got to continue giving it?
It's one-time bonus. It's
And the staff understands that?
They will the only health staff that is aware of it right now, to my knowledge, is our nurses. We're in the conversation with Lisa John, who supervises and supports them. They are aware of its one-time nature. All 8 staff that would be involved would be clearly communicated to that it is one-time bonus on top of our regular salaries that we were paying them.
Looks like a great plan to me, and appreciate your work on this.
Yeah, it really was a cooperative effort. Lisa had conversation with the nurses, and then Lisa and I worked on it as well, and so the team kind of put the idea together, so we're hopeful that it's well received.
So I would need a motion to approve this and get the money to the nurses.
So moved.
So Judy and Mark, any other questions for Brian or about this? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Thank you.
The second item that the committee is advancing for your consideration is summer school wage increases. This is a little bit, the reason that we're looking to break it out is that we look to get out and advertise for summer school teachers and summer school staff starting really pretty quickly after the new year starts, which is this particular item lives in handbooks. And so the handbooks come in front of you for your consideration in June. we would much rather advance the wage and advertise a newer updated wage in January, when we put those, post those positions, January and February. And so what we're proposing is connecting the increase in summer school hourly wages, because that's how our staff is paid, is by the hour for that work, and tie it to the base wage increase of the prior year. And so for example purposes, we had the 4.7% base increase last year that's affecting our current wages that we pay. For next summer, starting in June of 2023, we would increase last summer's wages by 4.7%. And so, what that means is kind of in the summary. For enrichment courses, that was $30 last summer. If we roll it up by 4.7, it'd be $31.41. For remedial courses, it was $35 last summer, and we rolled that up by 4.7, it'd be $36.65. And that would continue, we believe, to put us in a pretty good position for attracting staff to come in and work summer school.
Well, what's the total increase for that? Did you calculate what that might cost?
I'm sorry, Mark, I did not
Yep.
calculate all. I guess it would be a 4.7%.
Right.
What is
the
the
total
dollar
dollar?
amount?
Yeah. I don't have a raw dollar for you, I'm sorry.
It would be nice
This is
to have
similar to what we
broad-
do with co-curriculars, right, Brian? When we approve a base wage, that also rolls through with our co-curriculars. So it's just tying those decisions on base wages so we don't have floating other salary schedules out there that are all then addressed by that same piece. Otherwise, we're bringing it back at this time of the year, separate from other compensation. So it rolls the whole piece together.
Did we increase the hourly pay for summer school last year?
We did. We had left it pretty stagnant for probably 5 to 6 years prior to that,
Okay.
minimally. And so this is an effort to continually kind of keep it updated, keep it in, market competitive. Last summer with the increase, we put ourselves better than average. We weren't leading. Madison still leads by a pretty sizable amount there, but it put us in a good position compared to our neighbors, DeForest, Middleton, Sun Prairie, to hire staff.
Where are we within our neighbors? Where do we fall? Do you know what our neighbors are?
For this coming year, I do not know what they'll go with next.
Where were we last year?
We were in the top quarter. I don't know off the top of my head a specific spot.
I move we accept the proposal.
Second.
Second. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Thank you, Brian. And that brings us to administrative reports, referendum updates.
All right. I just have a real short update here tonight. Rebecca, if you can open up the presentation here, please. I'm just going to let you be my clicker through it. Yeah. We're in the process right now of just getting ready for our submittals to the plan commissions. Those are coming up in January. So what you're seeing in your board packet today is just an update of some of the exterior pieces that you gave some feedback on, that EUA has now gone forward with and formalized some of their plans. I just wanted to really articulate for you really what's occurring with our site plan, what that's looking like. Roxanne Johnson is also our civil engineer. She's been very active with regards to looking at how we can utilize and manage the stormwater. That's part of this approval process as well. So these are just kind of the part of the submittals. That's a pretty lengthy process, but I thought I'd just give you kind of the high level aspect of it. One of the things I wanted to point out is when we take a look way over to on this side of the property, we do have an easement. I think we've always known that. It's been there prior to, for probably 20 plus years. It's just a piece and we knew when we built the intermediate school that there was an easement road there. So that's just a piece that we are just it was asked that we articulate that as we do our submittal, so that we can articulate that is something that eventually will most likely come out to Woodland Drive, particularly as the areas to the south develop. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention as you kind of see that piece. That's something we really haven't talked about in this space, but that's not new. That's been there for a while. And it was part of, we needed to make sure that we had adequate setbacks, et cetera, when we did the intermediate school as well. You can go to the next.
Randy, before going
Go ahead.
past that, I know at the intermediate site, there's some regret that perhaps wider road and curbing
Sure.
wasn't part of that plan. Is there, have we learned from that so that as we look at the new one, that's gonna be addressed to some degree?
I know that was discussed as part of some of the feedback pieces. I don't recall off the top if that was really what those widths are. The curb and gutter, and I haven't heard that discussed recently, but I can go back and see where they're at with that.
Thank you.
Okay, you can keep going, Rebecca. This is some of the mock-ups that they have. This is obviously just a rendering of what the school could look like, trying to drop it in place with regards to general color schemes. Obviously, this is just to give you a sense of how it sits with people and cars and parking, et cetera. And it shows what it would look like. Next slide. Again, shows you some of those, just another view of it. Shows you really, they tried to really match the color schemes that we discussed at our last meeting. And this is all part of their submittals that then have to go through the plan commission. What they're looking at is the site plan, something that meets their standards. Are there any other feedback areas that they have to do? So there's certain criteria they have to go with the plan commission of the village and the joint plan with the village and the town of Westport. You can keep clicking. That's generally what my update is tonight. I'm kind of just wanted to show you what's being submitted so that you're aware of it. The other piece I wanted to bring to your attention is something that I'd like to do, and I just want to bring it also to your attention. As we start to look at heritage in the middle school, there's going to be a point here in the next couple of years where we're going to be tearing down heritage. There's a lot of history there. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is put together a group of people from the community to look at the history of the building and see are there things that we can salvage. I was talking to Kathy Bartling, who was a retired music teacher. She talked to me a few weeks ago, and I brought this up to her. She informed me that there's actually a retired group of teachers specifically from Heritage that have coffee once a month that she's invited me in to meet with. And there's also obviously some other people, probably. And Joan, you probably went to school there and taught there.
Many years.
So, I mean, there's a lot of this historical pieces there. When you go through the school, there's things that we want to salvage. I mean, there's some stained glass windows that had a very specific purpose. That was a donation from a family. There's things like the original W, that's a concrete piece in the side of the building. We'd like to see how we could utilize that. And then there's just a few other pieces that we're looking at. I need some feedback as far as what has meaning there. And so one of the things I'm looking at is trying to put together a group of people, invite them in, have them walk the building with our architects, with Vogel, and then as we get some of that information, see how we can bring some of that back and incorporate it in. So those are some things that I'd like to do, and as long as the board is okay with that, I will move forward.
Yeah.
And
I
Joan,
think it's a good idea.
You are welcome to be part of that if you'd
I
like.
would love to be part of that.
All right. That's the end of my report.
Thank you.
Can we save insurance money if we take monkey bars off the playground?
There you go. There you go.
May save us a few thousand here and there.
Remind me, Randy, is that parcel in Westport or Waunakee? Did we annex that into Waunakee?
Yes, that's part of Waunakee.
That's been annexed
Yeah,
into
that was
Waunakee.
annexed in when they were doing some of the other developments around it.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So Randy, as you pull out this memorabilia out of the old heritage, do you put it into the new heritage someplace, or what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think part of it, some of it you could do into the new heritage. Some of it might be part of something with the new middle school that goes there. I don't know yet. I mean, I also look at, personally, I look at some of the woodwork up there. Is there a way to salvage some of the wood and do something, have somebody create something with it?
Mhm.
So it's, I want someone who has a little bit better knowledge of that to look at it. That's why I'd like our EUA and our Vogel team to come through and see what's of value. But there's some stuff that has significant, like, historical value. I know that the stained glass window piece has meaning. You have some memorials over at the school. Are there ways that any of that can get incorporated? There's a courtyard in the middle that has some tiles from a previous group, from a previous project that I think Dr. Mishler and his wife did many, many, many years ago. Are there things that we can incorporate in? Similarly to how we did things at like the intermediate school where we had that stained glass project, are there ways that we could do some things at our new schools that commemorate some of the history? And I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm not quite the creative mind around that, but I figure there's some smart people that can help with it, but I'd like to facilitate it.
Good plan, thank you.
Yep.
So we've done the financial audit stuff. Oh, no, we haven't done the audit stuff.
No, the audit.
Steve, one more time.
Back to you.
So what you see in the packet was a draft version of the financial audit. So the audit is due to the Department of Public Instruction on December 15th. Our auditor was waiting for one additional piece of information that comes from a third party that evaluates our post-employment benefits. They actually did receive that. They sent Ally today the final version of that, which will be reported to the DPI. For board members, just to note, there's this required communication letter that was included in your packet. That's where auditors are really communicating directly to the board members about the audit experience. There's a section in there that says, like, as an example, were there any disagreements with management? You're welcome to certainly take a look at that. There were no concerns identified in that letter, but if there were, that's where they would put them. If you recall, last year they did recommend a audit of our technology, which Jack then gave us some contacts, and we went through that process to have a third party take a look at some of our technology systems. So they have used that letter to share communications back with the board. They're just, you won't notice anything this year, but they did have some advice last year. And so you'll see the full audit report, the required communication letter. It gets forwarded to the DPI, and we're just seeking school board approval of that audit. And the only thing that's changed from the draft audit is just the final verification of the post-employment benefit actuarial study. Be happy to answer any questions.
And you want approval from us of this audit?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Second, any other questions or comments?
I just, again, think it speaks highly of how well you're running the business operations in school. So thank you for all your great work.
Yes, thank you, Steve. We are truly blessed to have you. So, all in favor of accepting this, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. So, announcements?
Yeah, a couple. First of all, in your packet, you'll see correspondence from the Wisconsin Interscholastic Speech and Dramatic Arts Association. I think you've seen this several years in a row, but it's just recognizing Rick Braun and the high school one-act play for all of their excellent work that they've put in. So just wanted to recognize Mr. Braun and his students and all the accomplishments that they've continued to achieve in one-act play. The other piece I just wanted to bring to your attention is that, and I believe this, I think Roberta covered it in the paper, which was the Spectrum Awards. She had a picture of me in there, but I really wasn't the one who probably did most of this work. We received 2 awards from the Wisconsin School Public Relations Association. This is Annie Blackbird's professional organization. One was for the visual brand, so that was something that she led with a community group. Brian was part of that, so that's one of the certificates that we received, was recognition for that process. And then also excellence and honors with regards to the district website. And that was something Annie worked on with Rick France, who's our district technology coordinator. a lot of other people had hands in that to try and make that occur. But the Spectrum Awards are obviously sponsored by Spectrum, and there's a lot of different districts and categories that people are recognized in. So we were, Annie submitted these 2 projects, and we were selected amongst all of the recipients. So this was a conference, probably had north of 300 attendees, so it was a good day. I just got to go
Very
and
good.
accept them.
Nice, good work. Thank you. And that brings us to consent agenda, and as you think about whether you want to have anything highlighted or pulled out, I would like to make note of a number of donations this month. First of all, we have some donations to the Innovation Center. We have a GoPro video kit from TDS valued at $500. We have a 3D printer filament that will go to the Innovation Center from Mark Sajarski, valued at $2,000. Our Pride Pump, the Mefford family, again, has donated $1,000 for this month that we can use anyplace. And finally, we have a number of donations to our Student Financial Assistance Fund, which originally was created to help with our school lunch population for our free and reduced students, to make sure that they always had adequate money in their account for lunch. But with the number of donations we have gotten over the years, this committee, kind of spearheaded by our social workers, has really branched out, and they are helping students with many, many things in our free and reduced category of kids, making money available for all students to participate in co-curriculars and in field trips, and really to be held equal to all students in our district. So I am quite proud of this fund, and our Student Financial Assistance Fund this month received $1,000 from one community bank, plus an additional $618 that they just took in donations, and also contributed to that fund. The Lake Melvin Yacht Club donated $500. Waunakee Remodeling, Dan McGowan now owns that company, donated $1,000. And Neil and Sharon Krushak donated $5,000. So wonderful donations. I want to thank all of our donators for this month. Thank you. So with that, anybody want any reports pulled out or items voted on separately?
So move to approve the consent agenda
As is.
as is.
Second.
Any questions on anything? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you. And that brings us down to board business. So I'm hoping that if you're able to attend the state convention, you've connected with Rebecca and gotten her your registration information. Rebecca, do you want to say anything about that, or are you good? Good. Okay, any legislative update?
I think it's just a piece that we're watching very closely as they start to put together what the proposals are on the state budget. So we'll be watching that carefully. You'll see those, if the governor releases theirs in like February, and then they'll be working through that process, and hopefully we'll see something this summer that will then come together that will inform us for the next fiscal year, next 2 fiscal years.
Perfect. So, future agenda and meetings.
Stephen, we have a pretty tight turnaround here with the holidays and then coming back right away. We only have like a week after we get back that we'll be back in this room. Steve, was there a meeting that you and I were talking this afternoon? I forget which one you were looking for.
We would like to pull the budget committee together the first week in January. We're totally flexible on early in the morning, after work, whatever works for the committee. But we'd be looking for a date sometime that week.
It's January 1 through 7.
Yep, that week.
What date?
Do you come back on the 2nd?
We come back on the 3rd.
On the
Third.
3rd, so on that Tuesday.
Yep.
Could we do Wednesday?
Sure.
I'm good any day but Monday.
Sure.
Jack, are you good on
Wednesday would be fine.
Wednesday,
morning.
the 4th?
Yes.
7:30 in the morning again.
6:30?
Is that okay?
7:30?
I'm ready. I'm wide awake at 4:30, so.
7:30 is good, boys.
And then I'm looking for a co-curricular meeting, probably the week of the 9th or the first part of the week of the 16th. So co-curriculars is Brian, Ted, and Katie. We have a board meeting on the 9th, so
I can do Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, 11, 12, or 13th.
okay.
11th or 12th, work
It's like
for
a-
either one of
I
you?
could do the 12th in the afternoon, or, late morning.
I'm just gonna throw this out here, I haven't put this together yet. Oh, never mind, policy, we looked at third week, I was
Yeah,
thinking
we're
the
okay.
second week.
Yeah. Ted, I know your schedule's a little up in the air, but
Or I could do it like 7:30.
Morning's always good.
7:30.
7:30 in the
12th.
morning on the 12th? Would that work for everybody? All right.
Jack has gotten us into the 7:30 morning routine.
Yeah. This is.
'Cause they have better
It's
coffee.
all right.
The coffee is better at 7:30?
Yeah, this kind of, yeah, that's what I need,
Okay, if that's all,
so.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
So,
So you have some things for Judy.
Yeah.